Okay, Michelle, are we ready to go? Good morning, everyone. That's everyone. Welcome to all of our YouTube followers out there. And welcome to all of you for the final day of the December 2022 board meeting. So we have a couple of items of business to do today. And then we're gonna take a moment to recognize the accomplishment of our two retiring board members. And then we'll take care of a few administrative items and then we'll break. But there is work still to do. And I think it's been a really positive week where we've discussed a significant amount of substantive issues in a very thorough manner. And I'm glad we're getting good at focusing on the strategic issues at play and also willing to debate differences of opinion. The first topic today is our strategy document. And we're going to approve it, hopefully, for consultation. We've recirculated the document to reflect the comments we received from board members in our discussions on Monday. I'm pleased at this point to say that we had no significant substantive issues come back. That doesn't mean that we haven't received some editorial comments and a couple of suggestions to improve the execution of some of the ideas that we were after. But no one is suggesting any major changes at this point. To reflect that fact, I'm going to just turn it over to Veli, and he could explain the one or two items that we wanted to just put on the public record. At the same time, recognize that we will still have the ability to make editorial changes up to publication, and that will be at the discretion of me and the senior team here. Veli?
Thank you, Tom, and good morning, everyone. So maybe just at a high level, in terms of the main changes that were made to the turnaround document, I think you all saw that in section 1 on the questions, we just indicated that the respondents do not necessarily have to answer all the questions. We've made a few edits to the question about the IAASB and Ethics Board coordination, just to make that a little bit clearer and more direct. And we inserted a catch-all question under question 8. I think the other big change we made was under the strategic drivers, the one around the supporting implementation of our standards. I think what we heard on Monday is that we didn't maybe get the balance quite right in terms of our role in respect of supporting implementation, and also be a little bit clearer on this separation between first-time implementation guidance and non-authoritative guidance. So we've tried to make that a little bit clearer in the under the strategic driver, and then also emphasizing the notion of, you know, we can either be the developer or we can be the facilitator. That we also carried through to the strategic actions under strategic objective 1, as well as strategic objective 2. And then there was a section under the work plan where we talk about our ongoing work streams. And there we've also carried through that same message to that section that talks about implementation support materials. You would also have noticed that under strategic objective 4, we have added an additional action on our own sustainable ways of working. And then lastly, under section 3, which is the work plan section, in the introduction, we've given an acknowledgement in terms of us being flexible in view of some of the pressures that may be in the market in terms of responding to our proposals and implementing our standards. You will remember on Monday, we also agreed that that same, the sensitivity around that will also be expressed in Tom's forward. That is still outstanding. And then in table B, you will see that just immediately preceding table B, we did include a section to give a broad indication of our broad prioritization of those topics in table B, just to give stakeholders a little bit of a steer in terms of where our thinking is at the moment. And then you would also have seen that we've clarified a little bit around those topics under this ISA 500 series, and we just moved the footnote that explains the distinction between full scope projects and narrow scope projects. We moved that up front at the beginning of the table. So those were all those were the main changes that were presented to you. And as Thomas indicated, we received a few comments, and I'm not going to go through all of them. I just want for clarity purposes, just maybe to mention a few. So the one is on question 7, which is on page 4. The words that we've added there towards the end refers to our improved ways of working internally. So we'll just take out the term internally. I think that might be a bit, just talk about our ways of working. So that's one thing that we will change. Then on page 8, under one of the strategic drivers around evolving expectations around sustainability assurance, there's a reference to that the global baseline would need to be neutral to who the assurance practitioner is. Maybe just to make that a little bit simpler, we're just going to say the global baseline needs to be profession agnostic, because that's the terminology we've been using with our stakeholders as well. On page 13, from the PIOB, we just received a comment that, we refer to the PIOB's public interest framework, but it's not really the PIOB's public interest framework. So we'll just change the wording there and insert a footnote that that's the public interest framework that was included in the monitoring group reform recommendations, just to make that very clear. And then there was just one change that we thought we should just put on a slide. And that was, you will remember, the footnote about ISA 3000 revised. I'm just going to get to it. That was in table B. Sorry, I'm just trying to find it here. What's the footnote number? Oh, footnote 31. There we go. It's on the screen. All right, so what we propose adding in that footnote, you will remember there were some board members that thought that we should bring that into the table, and then there was others that say we shouldn't refer to 3000 at all. So we thought maybe the footnote that we had originally was sort of the right middle ground. But I do think this helps a little bit in terms of that there may be a need for a possible project. We make still clear that we don't anticipate it will happen in this work plan period, but maybe just add that wording of recognizing that any changes should not limit the application of ISA 3000 revised. It's just a message to say, 3000 is still fine. It's there, it can be used. There's nothing wrong with it. That is wording that we just wanted to insert. So I just wanted to show that on screen to see if everybody is happy with that. So Tom, that's all from me in terms of changes.
Okay. So I want to invite the ability of people to comment on what we've proposed and the proposed changes that Billy read out. Any other comments you want us to take on board before we approve the document? Like, I think we're being responsive. We'll be responsive to whatever change comes through. We again, I think that it's about clarifying the language and not misleading people about the technicalities of our governance arrangements. Okay, are we ready to vote on the consultation paper? So I'm gonna now, this is technically a formal vote. And since we like formalities here, I'm gonna turn over to Billy for the formal due process reading.
Yeah, Tom, so very briefly, as you know, the Planning Committee acts as the task force for the strategy and work plan. So in the Planning Committee's view, the significant matters identified as a result of its deliberations have been presented to the board for discussion. And in the Planning Committee's view, there is no significant matters that have not been brought to the attention of the board. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, thank you. So we ready to vote? I'm gonna just guess and go with who's voting for the approval of the strategy and work plan consultation document. Raise your hands. I see a digital hand for Warren. Okay, I see all 18 board members voting in favor of that. Okay, that's great. We're gonna get this out probably early in the new year, I would say, Billy.
Yeah, around the middle of January. Yes.
Thank you. I have some work to do too. I have to write my forward on it. So yes, probably middle of January. So lots of people to thank on this one. First of all, the staff, particularly Billy and Jasper, for all their work on this. But remember, it's worth reminding us of how we got to where we were here. This was an iterative exercise. We had a couple of workshops with planning committee members where we whiteboarded. We did the same exact exercise with the full board. So we wanted to make sure it was inclusive and capture the best of everyone's thinking, included in that exercise, Jim and we had a couple of PIOD representatives throughout the process. We benefited from the input of CAG as well. And this is only part of the way there. We're certainly going to benefit from the input of stakeholders to our proposed strategy. So thank you, everyone, and congratulations for getting the document out. I don't know, Jim, if you have any reflections before we turn to the next topic.
No, just briefly, I just want to mention that the CAG was actively involved in this plan. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. And Michael, any observations on behalf of the PIOB?
I think it's been a very useful process, good discussions along the way, and I think the end product is much improved for it. And so I think you've got a great consultation document to go out with.
Thank you all, and I'm looking forward to hearing what our stakeholders have to say. Okay, I think it's a little too quick to have a break right now. You think? We're now gonna go to ISA for LCE. We're gonna go through the issue of the proposed exposure draft and also the quantitative threshold issue as well. So I think I'm just turning over to Kai right now. He seems ready. You want a break, Kai?
I'm good to go on.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, as you said, we have two pieces that we want to talk about today. First, we will deal with the ED, the authority of groups, and part 10. And then when we've done with that, we can then discuss the quantitative threshold that you received later on. So we'll do it in two parts. Wednesday, you received the updated documents on the group. We've received very few comments on both the authority and part 10 and conforming amendments. There are just a couple of small edits that we propose, and Jasper will walk us through them.
Thank you, Kai. Yeah, so let's start with the authority first, and I'll guide you through the changes that we've made since we spoke to you on Wednesday. So we updated the prohibition based on what was discussed during the board meeting. However, afterwards, we received a comment that adding the physical presence, that wording, that it could be used to, or some could read it as well, that it could widen the scope of what we originally intended. So therefore, if you could put a slide up with some changed wording, we suggest to add for a specific audit procedure for the group audit in this as well. And the reason was mentioned that just mentioning a physical presence could also be by some could be interpretation that you could use it as well for an audit of basically an audit of a component, because you had to be there because, for example, because of translation or other issues. So that's why we did this to more limit it, and I think that was more the intent what the board had as well. Otherwise, on the prohibition in the EEM, so we added the second sentence back of the definition of component auditor, and We also enhanced and this is again a change, and I will read this out. I don't have this on the slide. A small change to the EEM, because there was a concern raised by a board member that it would be good to highlight the independence as well for component audits. So what we added right now is that part 3 contains requirements in relation to engagement quality, including relevant ethical requirements, and the direction supervision of the members of the engagement team and the review of their work. So it's really adding a reference to the relevant ethical requirements in addition to direction supervision and review. Then otherwise, we made some minor changes to the quantitative thresholds. So the task force also discussed some of the comments about the numerical indicators. We thought we would like to have these in for the exposure draft to get comments on there from our stakeholders. Then in part 10, under 10.2.1, based also what was raised on Monday in the board, we added some more flavor to the EEM. And I think that would help auditors as well applying the standards and getting to the appropriate results. So you see there are several places that we added some EEM. We also added in a new requirement, 10.2.2, and this is based on ISO 600 paragraph 18. And it's really about that when after the acceptance or continuance, then the engagement partner concludes that sufficient appropriate audit evidence cannot be obtained, and that then the engagement partner then consider the possible effects on the group audit. So it was raised, or it was suggested to add this as well, because like component information has a greater complexity than access in a single entity. So that's why we added that as well. And in 10.3.1, we deleted the sentence, and the reason for that was, I just want to highlight, is that it was repeating an earlier bullet. So that's why we took that out. So in essence, there's no change. It was there twice in there. I think that are the main changes that we made. So with that, Kai.
Yeah, I think this is that's summarizing the changes we made and also highlighting the one change or two changes that we've done since what you've seen, that you now seen on the screen. So I think by that we don't have any additional things to raise up front. So we can hand back to see if there are any specific comments from the board members. And I think, remember, this is going out for an ED, so there is an opportunity to comment on the ED as well. So it's probably the comments that would stop us from approving this as an ED that we're looking for, the really fatal flaw.
Okay, Len?
Yeah, thank you, Kai and Jasper. I just want to put on record, I really appreciate you putting through the changes on the physical presence and also some of the alignments with ISO 600, particularly the component auditor definition. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other comments? Just by no other comments, people are content with the changes that are being made? At least for the purposes of public exposure? Okay, so do you think we should get ready to vote on this narrow exposure draft as it relates to LC on part 10? Kai says yes, which now that I'm in good practice right now, that means I have to turn it over to Billy.
Thank you, Tom. So we're going to be asking the board to vote on the exposure of the group audit section. So in that regard, the task force is of the view that the significant matters identified as a result of its deliberations about group audits in the proposed ISA for LCE have been presented in the issues papers presented to the board, and is also in response to the comments that we received on exposure with the exposure of ED ISA for LCE. The task force believes that there are no significant matters that have not been brought to the board's attention, and the task force also believes that at this stage there's no need for consultation paper, field testing, or roundtable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Billy. So I'm gonna ask for approval of the the exposure on ISA for LCE Part 10. That relates to the audits of group financial statements. Is anyone unclear what we're voting on? Okay, we're being very formal here today. Okay, I'm gonna ask, does anyone want to dissent from the approval? I see no hands. Anyone wish to abstain from the approval? No hands. Okay, the last but not least, who wants to support the approval of the exposure draft? Raise their hand. Okay, let the record show that we had 18 hands. Congratulations to the team for that. Not only should we congratulate the task force, the staff, Amy, Dan, and Jasper, and Kazuko, and the board for the approval. Jim, any reflections on the inclusion of group audits now in our LCs?
Thank you, Tom. I think I'll just continue my theme on this one as well. The CAG had been involved multiple times. We've had many discussions. This was a standard that the CAG has significant interest in. So I'm glad to see it voted today.
Thank you. And Michael?
Yes, I would also express congratulations to the board and the task force on moving this forward. And I think that's great progress. I'm looking forward to see what comments we get on the exposure.
Okay, thank you. So we're not done with LCE yet. We have quantitative thresholds to consider. Kai?
Yeah, back to our favorite topic, authority. I did introduce this piece when we sent it out. I think it was yesterday. So agenda item 3I has the updated authority related to the quantitative thresholds. As you've seen from the what we did send out, there are two options in there. As I explained yesterday, we need to remember who this is for, and I think that's also why we introduced the one option by having all the text in the EM itself, that it is more clear and it is gives the jurisdictions more direction when they're considering their threshold. So I don't think I have anything else to add. I think, or the only one thing to add is that we will still, we did add another example, as you've seen from the Malaysia. We need to go back with them to see that they're fine that we're adding that in. I think also we have a small typo in there, but that's fine. We will fix that. This is not for approval. I think what we're seeking is the board's support so that we don't need to bring this topic back as a separate topic next board meeting, but it will come back as the together with the whole standard when we bring back them, so we can move on to other topics in the standard. So I think by that, I don't have any other introductory comments. It's probably more than to open for the board's feedback on this and direction, unless Amy or Jasper has anything to add. No.
So I regret that I missed this conversation on I guess it was Monday when we did it. I had to step out of the room, but so let me put my support for the idea of the inclusion of option A. You know, I've probably spoken to many more people on the topic of the authority, particularly regulatory authorities, on the LCE standard, and trying to explain what we were trying to do here and whom we were trying to target. And I'm not saying that we've met with universal enthusiasm for our approach, but there's more sympathy for our approach. And particularly when I explain the issue of what we had in mind from a quantitative threshold. And it seems to me that the use of footnotes only obscures the intent. And that if you want to make things sharp to people, you keep it in the body of a text. So certainly I would be in real support of the approach that we've taken in option A, recognizing that the board was pretty split at the last meeting, probably would have been further split if I added my vote to it. But I just really think that we should be mindful of what we're trying to accomplish here and why. I also remind you that this is what we have in mind, that as I said, it says discuss these definitions may be appropriate examples for a jurisdiction. It will ultimately be up to the jurisdiction to level up and level down. Now we have a good example of an OECD country and an emerging market here. And that sort of is a scalable thing. It's almost controlling for a level of development. So I feel like this is a pretty artful approach, particularly if we keep it in the main body. But I'd certainly welcome, since I didn't have a chance to go on the record early this week on it, I congratulate the task force for bringing this in. And I think it gives some clarity to the regulators who had real concerns about what we were doing here. Welcome. Any other comments? Ada?
So we have until 1 today? No, all joking aside. I'm with you, Tom. By and large, I think the language could have been a little bit sharper to articulate that this is what we had in mind. It now refers to those two examples of quantitative thresholds, but this is already moving into the right direction, and I can live with this. Thank you. And Lynn told me just now that we probably get the right answer where everybody's a little bit unhappy, and I'll go with that.
So I think we still have some ground. If you have some editorial comments to sharpen the language and intent, I think the task force would be receptive to it, since we're not seeking approval. What I think we're trying to get here is that we don't re-deliberate this broad quantitative point anymore. Diane.
I think this is really a step in the right direction, at least from my perspective. I was somebody who was very vocal about the quantitative thresholds. I personally like what you've got here. I would lean towards A, again, to Tom's point, because I feel like people just never read footnotes. And the only thing that I ask you to take a peek at, and maybe noodle, is back to Julie's comment, which, since I didn't go back and look at the preceding paragraphs to this section, but I do think we just want to make sure that we're leading with qualitative. And this is, we've always described this as kind of the backstop, right? And I just want to, I didn't go back and double check the lead in to this, but just not to lose that, because I think that is an important element, is really want you to do it through a qualitative. And then this is kind of the backstop. But I appreciate you guys taking care of this and addressing our comments. Thank you.
Josephine.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to echo Ado and Diane, and also support your thoughts on this, Tom. I agree that, you know, the absolute best position for me would also be just be a bit sharp with the language, but I appreciate all the efforts that the task force have done in trying to actually come to a good balance and compromise across the differing views of the board. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. Also, I would agree that option A, if you're seeking that, I would prefer that option. Thank you.
We will definitely be seeking a preference here. Wendy?
Thanks, Tom. And this was really well done by the task force, notwithstanding that I didn't think we needed any quantitative thresholds. I think the way it's been done is better than it was before, giving the alternatives and showing a range. And I would go with option A.
Thank you. Sue?
Thank you. And I said the other day that I didn't particularly mind where the stuff was located, so long as the two things were together. Having seen the drafting that you've done, and I think it's really good. I also have a preference for option A, for the reasons others have described.
Thank you, Sue. Kai?
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everyone. I think you are not surprised that I cannot live with both options due my comments which I have raised the days before. So I'm still very concerned about the thresholds for the small entities in the European Union, which would, in my view, even as an example, effectively preclude the use of the LCE standard by mid-sized entities in my jurisdiction, because Tom, as you have mentioned, scaling up would probably, that's my view, not be accepted by the regulator in my jurisdiction. This is what I expect. So this is still a fundamental issue from my point of view. Thanks.
Okay, Kai, thank you for putting that on the record. I do think implicit in many other remarks, though, is scaling it up within our text would be a fundamental issue for many of the board members here, including myself, on it. So, you know, I think this is why we had the whole discussion about what was a typical LCE. And the fact that you noted that regulatory tension hits at the heart of the concerns that many people have. So it's noted. I'm not dismissing it. It just, I think that's the tension we face as a board right now. Based upon what I've heard right now, I hear support for the direction that the task force has gone. There is a potential from sharpening some language here to be even more direct, and that will be considered by the task force. So please provide some drafting comments if you have it. The question is do we prefer option A over option B? Now, I started maybe, usually I don't do is I wouldn't have given my opinion up front, but I hadn't spoken earlier this week on the topic. So I gave my preference of A, and then others came in behind that. I just want to make sure that, with the exception of Kai, who doesn't support where we're landing on quantitative, whether people support option A versus option B. Anyone raise their hand who supports option B, who supports the approach relative to A? Any hands up? Let's say, so let me say that. So let me restate that. It's Friday. Let me state, anyone who supports the inclusion of the quantitative threshold supports B over A. I need another cup of coffee. I see no hands. So could I assume that we're supportive of A with some sharpening of language, noting a potential fatal concern from Kai because of the feeling that it will exclude, we're setting the bar too low? Okay, we're done with this topic. I think right now we're not going to remember, there's oftentimes we come back to topics and it's like we're going to redeliberate this, and then people aren't sure of the decision. The decision's quite clear. This is support of including quantitative thresholds in the way that we're proposing here with some updated language, and option A is preferred to option B by a strong majority.
Yeah, I think we have a clear direction on this now. And then next time we talk about LCE, this will not be brought back as a separate topic. So for now, we're done with authority.
There will be recriminations if anyone wants to bring this topic back. Note that for the public record. Kai, anything else? Kai, anything else you'd want to raise on LCE?
No, I think then the next thing you will see from us is you will receive the draft EM to give some comments on in sometime early mid-January. Is that? Yep. So that's the next point. So that then we will have the ED of group audits come out in January. So I just then want to thank everyone for their support and help on bringing us to the ED on groups, and especially task force and stuff. and all the other board members also helping us reaching this point, and also on that we don't have to bring back authority next time. So thank you.
There is always hope. As I remember, it's the Ted Lasso TV series. It's the hope that kills, though. Okay. Finally, I don't know, on this topic, I'm going to invite you to comment more broadly on the whole sessions, Jim and Michael. I don't know if you want to come in more specifically on LCE, or if you want to wait to your general comments.
General comments?
No, we'll get to that in a second. But if you wanted to say anything more on LCE, that's cool. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we are done with the substantive comments on papers and agenda items for this week. Congratulations to all of you. And it's always a little bit of a feats of strength to get through weeks because it's 5 intense days, and we really are having intense days again. And we're clearly fully back to normal in terms of in-person board meetings, even with Warren hovering over our heads behind us on the screens. So it's been a great week, and I really want to just thank the staff for all that they've done, and maybe a round of applause for the staff and their hard work. More than ever, I said this maybe earlier this year, we were going to engage the TAs in our substantive work in ways that maybe we haven't done in the past, but it will be intense and engaged. And I think the TAs, in addition to getting clearly everyone helping you get up to speed for the board meeting, everyone was extremely well prepared. And I think everyone participated throughout that, but also in the drafting of papers and helping us out. Incredible job in addition to your day job. So a round of applause for the TAs. And of course, I think the discussions have really been robust and substantive. We're kicking around ideas. We're learning collectively as we go about, and we're constantly iterating and improving our end product. So all of those are really important. I do want to thank the administrative team, Michelle and Megan, and the IFAC staff that make these meetings go smoothly, whether it's with the room setup, the cleaning, the IT support, the food, all of that. Without you, we wouldn't get this done. So many thanks to you as well. So a round of applause for them. And I think everyone will earn their holidays coming up. So that will be great. Let me pause right now and ask Michael on behalf of the PIOB reflections on the week.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I don't have too much to add at this point, but I would commend the board on a productive meeting, which was contributed to by all the work of the others that Tom has noted. There were good discussions on a wide range of agenda items, with useful direction being provided to the respective task forces that will help the respective projects to progress. I also want to express appreciation for your diligence in responding to PIOB comments, both those made at the September meeting and those made earlier in this week. So we certainly don't expect you to agree with everything that we say. And perhaps the solution that you come up with is not always what we might have had in mind. But it is good to see that that you do come up with good solutions when issues are raised. So that's much appreciated. The PIOB itself will be meeting next Monday and Tuesday, a virtual meeting this time. And given the shortness of time between now and then, there's not going to be a detailed discussion at our meeting of the outcome of this week's meeting. But certainly the main points will be highlighted for my colleagues. And then we've got a process of of a debrief session afterwards, once my observation report has been sent around and circulated to others to review, where I can share with them and get some discussion going on what happened this week. I would note that as part of the monitoring group reform recommendations, the briefing memos that the PIOB board members receive before we come to observe meetings like yours, and the observation memos that we prepare afterwards are soon going to be on the public record and posted on the PIOB website. So we've been working on agreeing the subtleties of how we're going to structure them and how much to say in them and so forth, given that they're not just for an internal audience going forward. So in my drafting work, I've got to keep that in mind as well. But I'll just leave it at that. And thank you and congratulations again on a very productive week.
Thank you. Okay, Jim, any reflections on behalf of the CAG?
I guess I would say on behalf of the CAG, congratulations for all your accomplishments this week. I said to Tom, to you earlier this week, this is quite a heavy schedule, but the board went through quite a bit. A number of the topics, particularly the work plan, LCE, going concern, and fraud have all been discussed with the CAG. As the fraud is moved forward, I think it is directionally consistent with the feedback from the CAG, and I think that they're going to appreciate where that has landed. I do think sustainability made such great progress from the time it was presented to the CAG last and to where it is today. I expect in March there'll be lots of feedback in terms of where that's going. So I look forward to that discussion, and congratulations again for your progress this week.
Thank you, Michael and Jim. I also should thank you both. It's a huge amount of time out of your schedules to attend the sessions, and we appreciate all that you've done this week to make our board discussions substantive and productive. So thank you for both being here. So I think it's the moment, at least from a public session standpoint, that it's a bittersweet moment, because we're going to recognize the huge amount of accomplishment of 2 departing board members, but it will be our last time to note their presence as a board member at the IAASB, which maybe they're looking forward to, speaking of time commitments, to reducing. But let me start with Lynn, who really has been given an unbelievable amount of work during my time, and even preceding my time, beginning with her board membership in 2017. Your voice as a public interest member, a public member on this board, it's nearly unrivaled, and you defend the public interest in so many ways, both in terms of your perspective, but also your dedication. And this dedication, I alluded it to, is some of the gratification of this job is this contact that we get, the stimulation of the board, being out in public and working with each other. And you were effectively quarantined in your home from this board for 2 years, yet you got so much done during that time at usually like 16 hours time difference to all of this. So, just a huge amount of appreciation for your commitment and also your constant guidance of me, because I need guidance all the time. Advice is a great thing. And Lynn, what I always appreciate about her is that she's gives honest advice. That's absolutely essential to making this board a more productive public interest focus and also a better place to work. And so thank you for Lynn. Let me just highlight some of her accomplishments with the public record from the board. In 2022, Lynn took up the task of chairing the board's work on sustainability assurance and helped us steer to achieve key milestones in a timely manner in our effort to cement our place as a preeminent global standard setter for sustainability assurance. Obviously, it was natural to choose Lynn to take this task up and get us going because she, as we said earlier this week, shepherded the EER guidance across the finish line in 2021. Lynn also chaired the fraud task force from its inception. We thank you for your leadership of that task force. Certainly in the early stages wasn't always easy, particularly remotely. And now just look at how far we've gotten on that standard. And I'm sure you'll be following its development through finality, though knowing you're not going to be listening to all of our board sessions on that. We'll send you a signed copy when finished. We can't forget your role in spearheading our professional skepticism efforts. You chaired the professional skepticism working group for some time. When it says quite some time in my notes, I think the staff can't even remember when that began. You've participated in other groups, being member of the planning committee and a vocal one since 2020. And at one point, I think you were a member of the auditor reporting implementation working group. So really, Lynn, thank you on behalf of me, on behalf of the IAASB, but more importantly, on behalf of everyone who benefits from high quality audit and assurance standards around the world, for your huge accomplishments. I do think you've earned your rest from this board. Now, no more 4 a.m. sessions for you. For us, you can sleep in. So thank you. We have a small gift to present you. Okay, Len, my good friend, who sits right next to me and believe it or not, lives less than 3 miles down the road from me. Yet I don't think we've ever seen each other in the same time, maybe once, which means that shows you what Len's life is like. He is always traveling. He makes my travel look minor. What could I say about Len, who's been my deputy chair now for a couple of years? I think what's amazing about Len is that his quiet contributions behind the scenes and a huge impact without making a big fuss about it. And he really has been in a quiet but determined and influential way, been a huge presence at our board. And his reach for this board and dedication to this board probably touches more continents than anyone else on this board. And talking about doing things in extraordinary times and under difficult conditions. I asked Len recently, how many months has he spent this year in quarantine hotels? And I think it's almost 1/3 of the year. And a lot of it was because of his fulfilling of his duties for this board or for his day job, which is a huge contribution to this board. And so he's a clear example that you could be from the profession, but take a real public interest spirit to your day-to-day job. And while working in the profession, but at the standard setting board. You've had extensive involvement in the IAASB's project work. You were a member of the ISO 220 task force through the approval of the standard. That meant that you were also a natural choice to lead ISO 600, and you took over that chair in 2019. It was when you took it over, it was on hold, and then through your leadership, you got it through the revision and approved last year. In the meantime, he did that with huge amount of outrage, and I think this has helped to strengthen our relationships with the regulatory community, whether it's IASCO and FER, and practitioners and other stakeholders throughout. I think it was almost between every meeting, you had some outreach as the documents came forward, and it was testament to your knowledge and your commitment to bring other points of view that it went out without much opposition. So thank you for that. After completing ISO 600, you also became a task force member on 2 other projects, fraud and listed entities of PIEs. A less well-known fact that you were involved in the early work conforming amendments to the IAASB standards as a result of the IASB revisions to the IASB code. You've been an advocate for the IAASB, particularly among the regulatory community. You've been a big member of our planning committee and guide the strategic direction of the board, and in countless ways have been my advisor behind the scene as deputy chair. You were a natural pick to be the deputy chair when that role came up after Fiona's retirement, and it's been a great honor to be able to work with you over the last couple of years. So I want to thank you for all your contributions to the IAASB, but also your years of service to make public markets work better with the SEC as well. And so my hope is that your retirement for the IAASB doesn't end your career in supporting the public interest and making markets work better for the world's economy. So thank you, Len, and I want to present you something on behalf of the IAASB.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have some opportunities at executives where they could give the real rebuttal to tell them what they think of me. And off the record, I figured that was better for my ego. Okay, we're gonna bring the public sessions to the close right now. A few administrative items. Draft minutes for this meeting will be provided in due course, but due course these days is a much more rapid turnaround. So they'll be posted and we'll approve those at the March 2023 meeting. There is a call scheduled for February 7th. I don't know if we've determined whether that will go forward. My guess is yes, right?
Tom, we just need to go back, but what we aim to do, if we're going to use that call, we want to use it for an IAASB update, almost like we did at the beginning of the year, but that's still in progress. We still just need to confirm with them.
Okay, the next board meeting will be in person, will be held on March 20 to 24th. Details have not been finalized yet. Now, remember, we moved this meeting back by a week. So the CAG session will there will be a week's gap in between. The CAG will occur on the 7th and 8th of March. We'll be in contact if your presence is needed. In many times, we're trying now that you don't, because particularly since it's a 2-week gap, that maybe your presence will be done virtually too, that you don't have to travel back and forth. So we're trying to be efficient about that. To Sue's point, more sustainable in our practices as well. The March 2023 IAASB, as highlighted in agenda item 1, posting will likely begin on February 27th. Mark your calendars for that date. Lynn, no need to mark yours. Okay, we're gonna close right now. We're gonna have a brief executive session to have some fun. But thank you all. Thank you for listeners and stakeholders who do diligently follow us. We would not be publicly accountable if you weren't there. And so appreciate that. And now to our executive session. Michelle and Armand, could we